Welcome to the Living Spiritually Podcast, Come Alive edition. Here are your hosts for today, Paul Galloro and Catherine Stilo.
It's time for us to come alive. Duh. I really think we should have lyrics to the opening of our song. Don't you agree?
Totally agree. I totally agree. And the jazz hands and all the posse that goes with it.
And yeah, there's like, it's a burst of glitter with the hands, and the glitter falls and that it fades out. Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, hey.
Well, we were talking about having like a lighting crew and hair and makeup and everything. So why not get the whole like dancing, kind of like Family Guy opening?
Yeah,
right?
I was just thinking that. Yeah. But we have to wear like the bodysuit with the tuxedo jacket over it and kick our legs out.
I mean, as long as we can have top hat and a cane. Yeah.
1,000%. Okay, I'm going to put that in my rider for
musical opening.
Exactly.
Must dancing, Rockettes, all of it. Mm-hmm.
Backup dancers, coming at the cake, the whole thing. Oh my God, Kitty girl, how are you?
Oh, I'm amazing. Oh, I got farm hair. We were just working and everything. Yeah. So, well, I was going to toss it back and say, how are you? And first, I'm just going to go right into it. I got to say, congratulations. Listeners who aren't sure what we're congratulating Paul for. Paul was named.
Crowned,
yes. canfitpro Fitness Professional of the Year 2023 Fitness Instructor Specialist. So amazing. Bravo. That like I was watching, I tuned in like right at the moment that it all happened, and it was just wonderful to watch. So how do you feel? Congratulations. Let's go.
Well, first off, I want to thank you because of your sneakiness that actually made this happen. So for those of you that don't know, Catherine was the one that put my name forward. She nominated me to be Fitness Professional of the Year. And so thank you for that because, and as I said in the newsletter that I sent out, thank you for seeing in me something that I wasn't ready to look at. And also that I never really even considered as like an option, if that even makes sense. But thank you. It feels amazing. And that whole journey of going through the process, because once my name was put forward, there was like steps that I had to do. I completed this whole nomination package that I got to review my accomplishments for the year, which I mean, I'm so blessed that I love what I do, and I just continue showing up and opening up my heart and letting it pour out. But I never really sat down and looked at the things that I've accomplished. So that was really fun. And then the other aspect that was cool was considering what my vision is, not only for my career, but for the fitness industry and my work in the industry. So that was just like, that within itself, even if I wasn't crowned Fitness Professional of the Year, just doing that activity, exercise, project, I'm not sure what it's called, but going through that process was pretty amazing. So if there's anybody that's listening that is considering it or has thought about it or is even just like curious, just look at those two things. What are your accomplishments, and what's your vision? Like, what are you working on? Why are you doing what you're doing? And how do you want to see the world? That was amazing. And then, I mean, that moment was just like wild because, so in 2015, I was awarded Specialty Presenter of the Year at canfitpro. That they told me ahead of time. They're like, hey, listen, you're going to get this. So make sure you're at the opening ceremonies to receive it. But this time I didn't know. They told all of the finalists like, hey, you're a finalist. We're going to call one of your names. So I was just sitting there and I was like, oh my God, what if this doesn't happen? Oh my God, I think it's going to happen. Wait, what if it doesn't? Oh, wait. So it was like back and forth, but it was, it was pretty cool. And then just like after that has been Amazing. So for those of you that are watching this on the YouTube or on Spotify, you can't really see it, but where I'm pointing right now is where I have it resting right now. So it's always there with me in this space where I teach. So yeah, so
Amazing.
thank you.
Amazing. You are so welcome. And I didn't nominate you because you're my friend and because we have this relationship. I nominated you because I see what you are doing, and more importantly, I see how you are showing up in the world. And that's why. And I'm glad that you outlined what process this is, because this isn't just a popularity contest.
Yeah.
This is based on how am I showing up? What am I doing to create a bright world and to inspire other people? And then there is an advisory panel that actually makes the decision. So it's not popular voting. It is a panel that then awards it. And anybody who does want to go through the process that Paul went through, our last episode of Come Alive, we kind of did the bragging episode where it's actually reflecting. So we if anybody wants to listen to that episode who hasn't, go through the questions and see how things start to show up. And kind of like when I look at this whole process, a lot of people see the presentation of the award. So they see the crowd erupt and the exuberance and the excitement. And so sometimes it can look like, well, that like he knows what he's doing. He's like got a vision and he's gone like straight for it. And there's been nothing in his way. Like sometimes we can look at those snapshot moments and not understand the path behind it. And so when I look at, and when we talk about coming alive and how do you come alive? Well, it's not always a straight path. It's not like, it's not like, here's where I want to be. Here's how I want to come alive. I know, like, it is like a squiggly path, a circuitous path. It spirals. It like spirals.
It's hopping from one dimension to the other.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I want to talk about that. About coming alive is not always a direct like A to B process.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. Because it's not, and what's not, and thank you for kind of highlighting that, because that's also something that I need to be reminded of as well, because what people don't see is the amount of times that I've cried, the amount of times that I've heard the voices in my head tell me that I can't do it, and the amount of times that I kind of held myself back because I listened to those voices. I mean, now it's still a work in process. I'm not, an enlightened master in any way. There's still moments where I'm like holding myself back, even in these moments. But definitely, because it's not a straight path to anything in life, right? And whether it's receiving an achievement like this or just like existing on this planet and doing the work that we do for ourselves, on ourselves. So why don't you open this up? Like tell me what your so my first question, and I know our journeys have been not the same in detail, the same in experiences that we've had. So so like, were you always on this path? No. And also, like, sometimes I don't even know what the path is. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just know that I'm doing the work. And I know, even as I say that, what does that even mean? I know some listeners and doing the work, it's such a trendy thing these days anyway, right? What does it truly mean?
And then I'm like, I don't want to do any work. Like, why does it work?
Did I come to this planet to work? No.
I didn't come to this planet to work. I guess the question is, are we actually doing the things that light us up? And that's what the path would be. Is that in each moment, am I making the choices that light me up?
Yeah, actually, that's a beautiful kind of way to look at it, because that's the thing. Like, if we didn't do the things that light us up, we would just be sitting in, I don't know if we'd be sitting in darkness, but we wouldn't be, shining bright or whatever it is. And that's where the work is, because I could easily be complacent. I could have just stayed at my government job, getting my paycheck, going on my holidays, clocking in at 9, clocking out at 5. I could have easily done all of that stuff. And there are people that lights them up,
Yes.
and that's their path. I love that for them. That wasn't for me, right? I noticed for the decade that I did that, as I did that, I got darker and darker. I got more cranky, more miserable. Now it was, I think I had just turned 30. It was me, or maybe it was my 30th year that I left. And there was a bit of growth that I went through in those last few years of my 20s, that led me to do that and make that choice. But it started before that, the moment that I stopped and I was like, wait a second, there's got to be more to this. And we've talked about this numerous times, right? With that moment where we're like, okay, there's got to be more to this. And so, yeah, the work comes in showing up and shining our light. That for me is, and for everybody, it's different, right? So I had to look at the things that I did to dim my own light, but then I also had to look at the people around me that were dimming my light when I didn't even notice that that's what they were doing, right? Whether it was an intentional dimming or not, for whatever reason, when our two energies came together, mine and theirs, there was this thing that just, for whatever reason, like I said, whether it was intentional or not, it would just make me shrink. Yes. Yeah, it was just doing those things. And somebody, actually, Crystal Eves, said this to me. We were having a conversation last night. Because a funny thing, and if I can share this, she was talking about doing a dance class, and she was thinking of joining one, and I'm talking about, I'm doing an astrology course. She's like, it's so funny, you're doing astrology and I'm doing movement, when I'm the one that does the movement and she's the one that does the astrology. So it was just really funny. But she had said, you become the 6 people that you hang around with. And when she said that, I was like, oh, because, you hear that often when you're doing the work, like, be mindful of the people you surround yourself with, because I think it's like, there's an average or something. It's 6, 7, or 10 or something. Like the 10 people that you surround yourself with is like, you kind of, that's the vibration that you're hanging out in. And so, there was just some vibrations early on in my life, not just my career, but early on in my life, that I kind of hung around with, because I thought like, oh yeah, we're doing the same thing, we're in this together, but there wasn't. There was a disharmony there. There was something that, for whatever reason, I didn't allow myself to be as myself as I could. So, noticing that. And also, because a lot of times my parents would say things to me, they're like, oh, I don't know about that person. I'm like, you're wrong. And then, having to admit that my parents were right. That's on some things, not everything. But I don't know if any of that, those are just some of the things that come to mind when you're.
That is so rich, because in that it talks about some of these things that trip us up as we are finding that thing that lights us up, or if we found it, actually living it, because there are so many times. So there's so many times where I wasn't doing the thing that lights me up for other reasons, like this false narrative of security. Well, the secure path is to go to school, to get a job, to get a steady paycheck, to have benefits, to give your time until you retire. So that's, and again, we're not saying that is, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as inside, every day, every moment, you are on fire. Well, okay, maybe there's moments where we're not, but if the majority of the time that is lighting you up, then everything's good. It's when it's in those moments where it's like, I feel like I'm doing this for something but I'm trading too much of myself. And in that, in that trading too much of myself, I'm sacrificing something and I'm not in alignment. So that is like taking a huge amount of energy. And then my light is getting dim because I'm expending so much energy in being something or serving something that doesn't light me up, that there's an energy expenditure and there's nothing coming in. So I progressively get dimmer.
Yeah.
And then when I do make, it could be a small change, because 1 degree, we've talked about this too, 1 degree of change, and then you map that out is huge. Like over time, it's a huge change. So when I start to make those that I'm back in alignment, then the light starts to shine again.
Yeah.
And I also heard in that these, and I think of the hero's journey or the heroine's journey of having the road of trials and having along the way helpers and hinderers. And I know that there's been times in my life where the hinderers or I mean, it always comes back to me, but let's just say the hinderers, where things that people have said or reactions, I have shrunk and felt like I'm not good enough. And whether it's colleagues or whether it's mentors or people that you're report, like a technical reporting relationship, or whether it's your friends or your family or your partner or whatever, how words can just like knock me off. But yes, it was that, but it was always reflecting back to me to point where I'm not truly believing in myself and in alignment. So I call them hinderers, but it's like, it's really me.
So, totally.
Yeah,
totally. And because at the end, and it took me a while to get to this point where you're saying, they're the hinderers, but it was me, totally 1,000%. For me, it was when I started to realize, wait a second, what am I getting out of this? And I don't mean that in a transactional way, but I just mean like, what's the benefit of me actually believing what that person's saying or allowing them to continue doing that, not having that boundary? And then when I started to like notice it within myself and then set those boundaries, then that's kind of for me when I kind of took my power back, as they say, but just kind of realized, and not even realized, in A Course in Miracles, we talk about how we forget our light, and that's where our suffering comes from. So they talk about recognizing, recognize, to cognize, or if that's even a word, but like cognition, right? Mind, to remember that truth within us. And so when I recognized that power within me, and then I was like, oh, okay. All right. No, I'm not available to that anymore. Nope, that doesn't work for me anymore. I know I did that before, and thank you for being on that journey with me when I was allowing that before, but it doesn't roll like that anymore. So you're welcome to work with my new boundaries, and we can continue to do this together. Or if you don't like these boundaries because you were benefiting from me not having them before, then there's a reason why you're on that side of the boundary and not this one. So that was part of the process, right? And I think it's easy, because I was that person, it's easy to sit there and be like, oh, well, they're doing this to me, and it's because of that, or because of that's happening, until I started to say, yes, that has happened, or yes, that is something that's happening that's coming toward me, but I don't have to stand in its way. I can just kind of move to the side. And I don't know if we talked about this before. I grew up, I played video games as a child, and through my teens and stuff. And I was flabbergasted to find out that, so Super Mario was my game of choice. I was just like my mind was blown. It was like somebody told me that there's a whole other dimension that I can go into when they told me this. But when I learned this, Mario is not actually moving through the world. The world is moving. He's in the middle of the screen. And yes, he jumps up and he ducks down and he moves around, but he always stays in the middle of the screen, and it's the world that moves around him. So it looks like he's going from one end of the course to the other, but he's staying in one spot and the course is playing from one end to the other. So it's this illusion that he's moving through it. And that, I remember this, I was in Italy running a yoga retreat when this kind of like came to me. That's true for life, right? Because the connection that I made was with, in A Course in Miracles, we talk about how this entire world is a mortal illusion. And we've discussed this again. It's not that this glass that I'm holding is an illusion. It's just that, yeah, this glass is a glass, but I could easily make it something else. And this, I see this play out when it's not that yes, I've had multiple partners, but if I actually sit down and look at it, it was the same partner over and over, just in a different body, right? So when we say that this world is a mortal illusion, what we're saying is this circumstance, whether it's it's within you, it's going to show up in all of your relationships in some way, shape, or form until you shift that within yourself. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. Oh yeah. So it just, we can change our circumstance. We can change the things in our lives when we start to look within ourselves and ask the questions. Now, I also want to be mindful that that's not to undermine any of the things that have happened to us that have caused traumatic experiences and have caused like trauma within us. I'm not saying that I'm the reason why ... happened, but I can decide what I do with what has happened to me. So yeah, sure, I got the shit kicked out of me by people in my career. And I say that like, not that they physically beat me, but you know, there was like blows to the ego, or you know, punches in the heart that like kind of like paralyzed me for a bit. There was this moment, and I'll talk about this. I'm okay with talking about this now. But there was stuff that had happened that literally paralyzed me in my career, that I kind of just stopped. I didn't know what to do, and I kind of shrunk. And when I started to realize that I was allowing that shrinking to happen because of the circumstances that have happened to me, when I realized that, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to let that shrink me anymore. It happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying it was my fault that it happened, but it happened. And now I'm choosing to do this with it. And yeah, so all those words just came out of my mouth. What were we talking about again?
They're amazing. It's that it's not a straight path to like coming alive is not A to B. There are things that happen to us. And yes, there's degrees of like what happens. And I find that it's, for me, any of those things, hindrances, looks of disapproval, vibes of they're crushing in whatever form they come.
Totally. And I'm just going to do a hair flip for a second. But what's really cool for me, if I can, I do want to kind of sit in this for a moment for myself. There's a lot of people that have witnessed the things that had happened to me. They witnessed them. And then for them to see now this accomplishment and allowing I truly had to because, okay, when I received an email from canfitpro saying, you've been nominated by Catherine Stilo for this award. In order to move forward, you have to do this. They outlined all the steps. And I looked at that. I'll never forget. I was at Good Life. I was sitting with the general manager of the club. I was in the middle of my shift, and I looked at my phone. I was like, I put my phone down and I said, oh my God, this just happened. And I ignored it. And she goes, oh my God, that's great. I was like, no, we don't talk about it. And I literally left that email. I put it back unread, and I left it there for weeks before I even considered looking into it. And we were approaching the deadline. So I was like, girl, you better do something about it now. So I got my shit together and I moved forward. But I could have easily said no and shrunk myself yet again and not have gone through it, the whole process. But people that have like come to me and knew the background story and then saw that I finally put my like, because I'm not this award has everything to do with just not okay, hold on, I want to be mindful of how I say this. It's not just me, because if it wasn't for the people that I collaborate with, you, Claudia, Crystal, all of my students, if it wasn't for any of those people that I do this with, it wouldn't be possible, because I would just be doing this to avoid and nobody would be receiving it, right? But this wasn't me backed by another organization. This wasn't me, doing stuff for another company. This was all, it wasn't something that somebody else created for me and then I was just doing, like, this was all the stuff that was like an accumulation of my knowledge and my experience that had poured out of me in the last year. And so that was really cool. And I also hope that, like, I know the people that have watched me sort of come to life again and grow and do all of that stuff, I hope that they're proud, and I'm sure they've expressed it. And there's a part of me that's always going to want to, like, oh, I hope that Catherine's really proud of me that I did this, just because of the contribution that you've made to all the ways that you've encouraged me and all the ways that you've inspired me and all the ways that you've helped me keep my light going, because it's not just me. But it felt different. So anyways, that again, I had something. I was going somewhere with that, but that's where we ended up.
It just again reinforces that the helpers and the hinderers are all the voices inside.
Yeah.
They're all the voices inside.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not anything that's coming from the outside. It's always, because I even think of the moments that I've had where I look at something and I'm like, no, I can't do that. And it's not that anybody said anything. It's that voice inside. Yeah. And then it's like, well, where do I find the place that it's going to light me up, or this is the light that I'm going to get from that, the energy I'm going to get from that outweighs the little voice that's saying you can't do this, or you're not worthy, or whatever we all have those little voices. And I think that this is something that I never knew until we start sharing these things and feeling vulnerable. I never knew that other people had these voices. I thought that was only me that had, and the Artist's Way calls it your sensor. Yeah, I love that book, The Artist's Way.
I love it. I'm so glad you brought it up.
Yeah. And and I always think now it's the sensor. And so I think that book was the first time that I realized that, well, this is not something personal to me. Mm-hmm. This is a common thing. And then as we start talking to people, including people who have done amazing things, I started to go, oh my God, everybody has this anchor or sensor or whatever it is that's like pulling them down, and somehow have found the energy or the helper voice or something kicked in to progress things. So
yeah. One of the, as you're speaking that, and as you're saying all of that, I just am reflecting on me, and because I got to a point where, so okay, first I think of that, and we've talked about this story all the time. There's that the tale of the man tells the son about the grandfather tells his grandson about the two wolves. Mm-hmm. Which one thrives is whichever one you feed. Are you feeding the fear wolf, or are you feeding the love wolf? Yeah. And I know from just me, so the hinderers were reflecting those things within me where I thought that I wasn't enough to do the thing. Yes. But then the people that celebrate me are also a reflection of the voices within me that are saying, Paul, yes, you're doing great. Mm-hmm. So with that, I'm trying my best to be someone who I know, like you said, Everybody has this. So I know when I'm encountering someone and I hear them say something, I try to, and I'm not saying like this is my sole duty and I'm taking on this responsibility, but what I try to do where I can, where it comes natural, I try to be the what do you call that thing that you attention everybody, listen, like that
Megaphone.
megaphone
Yeah.
for that voice that is obviously a whisper right now.
Yeah.
So if I can be the megaphone just and reflect that back to you. An example, someone from Arise, she texted me last night. She said, "Hey, I'm going for this interview tomorrow. Do you think you can give me some words of inspiration?" And so when we got on Arise, and the next morning, we did a voice note. We sent it to her. We all were just like saying things, and it's not like I'm just blowing smoke up her ass. Like I was saying stuff that like I truly meant because that's what I've witnessed, but I just needed to turn on that megaphone for that voice within her, and it needed to she needed to just hear it back to her. So that's another thing that I kind of hope to do, because and I'm not doing it because I hope someday somebody's going to do that to me. I'm doing that because some days people have done that for me. Yeah. Right. And so I think that's also something to remember in this, because again, I'm going to bring it back to A Course in Miracles. I mean, it's a universal theme. It shows up in many different ways. This just happens to be the way that I know, the way that it sort of came to me, is that, I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, we're here to help people remember their way. Just as we're here to remember ours, we can also give that gift of reminding someone else of that as well. Yeah. 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 So thank you for being that megaphone for me when I needed it, because again, I'm a human being. I mean, I sometimes try to, not I try to deny it. Sometimes I do deny it. It's like, I can't possibly, but I always say, I'm in this world, I'm not of this world. But at the end of the day, I am a human, and I too can fall to the human condition. And I too can, hear those voices so loud sometimes that I'm like, I don't want to fucking do anything because that voice is so loud. But I've just been so blessed to have people reflect the quiet voice within me and amplify it and remind me of that. Yeah. So thank you for being that person. One of the people.
I'm going to just take a moment and receive that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Because I mean, you're amazing. And I'm not just saying that because I'm just saying that. I'm saying it because it's true.
Thank you. I'm going to sit in that because I also recognize how that letting that land can sometimes feel uncomfortable, and then wanting to deflect it. And no. Yes, I am. And anybody who's listening right now, you are amazing. You're totally amazing.
Yeah. And you
not
can do
because you're
anything.
doing anything, just by being. You're amazing. You're amazing. And let that land.
Yes. And receive it.
And if there is a voice that comes up and go, she's not talking to you, he's not talking to you, then acknowledge that voice and say, oh, okay, that's interesting. What are you trying to tell me?
Tell me a bit about yourself.
Yeah, like let's turn and look at this voice. Okay. All right. Why is he or she not talking about me? Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
In my experience, and I mean, it wasn't like the second I looked at that voice, I was like, oh, I get it now. Because sometimes you look at that voice and you're like, oh shit, you're right. That voice grows and then it gets the megaphone and you're like, ah. But it takes a minute to you're going to turn to that voice and you're going to see it. And then what usually happens is, just like when you turn on a light, a cockroach scurries into the darkness. That happens to those voices that are there to keep your light dim. The second you turn to it and you ask the question, okay, tell me more, or you just shine your light, or like, okay, I hear you. And also I don't believe you. I believe this instead, you know, that eventually it scurries away, it shrinks. I mean, I haven't gotten to the place yet where they're completely gone, but
Right.
but I'll keep on shining the light as best as I can. I'll keep on
Yeah.
looking at it. That's the thing. And that was one of the things too, if I can bring it back to this text message that I received, because they had said, "Oh, I'm feeling a certain way," and I said, "Okay, you know what? We're not spiritually bypassing anything. That feeling's here. Let's name it. What's happening there right now?" Okay, great. We heard that. Excellent. And also remember this. You are amazing. You can do anything. I'm watching this show on the Netflix called Glamorous. And one of the characters said to one of the main characters, you can do hard things. You can do hard things. And I think we often forget that. We look at the hard things and there's that voice that says, "You can't do that." And we believe that over, I'm a fucking child of God. I can do whatever the hell I am here to do. There, I said it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say God, I mean love. You know?
Yes. It's that drop.
Yeah.
We're the drop of the ocean.
Yeah.
And we're still connected to it.
Yeah.
Because we're just that. Of course, you can
it.
do anything because you got the whole ocean behind you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And within you.
And within. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And sometimes those voices come up because this is another thing about, you know, are we actually doing these things that light us up? That's going to shift. It's not this, like doing the same thing. It's not always going to light us up in the same way that it did initially.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means there's a refresh that's needed. Sometimes it means that maybe like we jump paths a little bit, or maybe it's to change the course. So sometimes those feelings and those voices are coming up to actually say, okay, like let's keep conscious of have I gotten into that routine of, well, this is what I always did, so this is how now I define myself, so this is who I am, and then all of a sudden it's gotten stale, but I'm still doing it because I've got that momentum. But that momentum is no longer momentum. It's starting to level off. And then that quickly becomes inertia because it's actually time to jump track and start again. So I think there's in that change when we need to change, like honor the seasons, especially now as we start to move into fall. This always reminds me of, this is a time of movement. This is a time of change. This is the time to start letting things fall away and what needs to fall away. And yeah.
And it's also a time of celebration because as some stuff falls away, there's still the bounty that stuff like created for us, right? Like we're going to pick the pumpkins off of these vines.
Yes.
The vines are going to go, they're going to return to the earth. The worms and all the microbiome stuff is going to come and break that down. But we're going to take that pumpkin and we're going to turn it into pumpkin pie, or we're going to make a delicious meal out of it. We're going to do something with it that is going to continue being an expression of that within us. Yeah. And I love that because that reminder is always there. And another thing too, I mean, you know, it really helped me because for a moment I was defining myself just as a yoga teacher. And and again, in A Course in Miracles, we talk about, do you identify with the body or do you identify with the spirit? So identifying with the body would be identifying with the title. I am a yoga teacher. I am a yoga therapist. Like then it just limits you into this one thing. But once I started to realize it has nothing to do with yoga. Yoga, thank you, yoga, because you've been a beautiful tool that I can use to express what I'm here to share with this planet. But as I said in my speech, I'm going to continue helping people fall wildly in love with themselves because that's why I'm here. I happen to do it through movement and contemplation and astrology and all those things. But if I was interested in, I don't know, if I was a dancer and I would like to put on shows for people, that would be how I would like it goes back to A Course in Miracles. We say it's not about form, it's content. And so where you said, like, you know, sometimes we might have to jump course. The essence, the spirit within us is not changing. It's just the form in which it's
Mhm.
coming out of us is changing. Right now, where I am, I'm doing it through movement and contemplation. In a year from now, 2 years from now, and 7 years from now, I don't know, it might be crocheting. It might be uh, boating. I don't know. Things
Yeah.
are coming to my head. I'm
Yeah.
just saying words, but it can be anything. And I think that's the other thing too, being okay with that, because then there's that cycle. Then we have to kind of be okay with the cycle of life. Right? There's going to be
Mhm.
moments where it's summertime, the sun's out, we're playing in the sun, all of that stuff, and then the sun starts to sink into the horizon, and things start to die off, and then we get into the winter. I mean, we'll make the best out of it, but we also have to acknowledge that things die and go to sleep, or they become
Mhm.
dormant in the winter, but only to come back to the spring and
Mhm.
start all over again. So
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes,
Mhm.
like, just because something ends, it's never an ending, it's just a transitioning.
Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Throwback to
Throwback.
episode 12 of Come Alive. I love that.
Yeah, it's having the grace to let the formless take form and letting that form like go back into the formless and have that dance of letting the essence come through in whatever form it's going to come through, and then let it fall back when it needs to fall back.
Have
Yeah.
you ever given yourself the opportunity to sink into that when you've like noticed that there's this transition that's happening? I'm just going to kind of sink into the formless for a moment while I watch the form come forward again.
I am better at that, but no, I have never fully let myself. And I think it's because always, whenever that would happen, it would be that programming of like, I can't just sink back into the chaos, and wow, this is uncomfortable, and the not knowing is uncomfortable because I'm supposed to know. I'm supposed to know this. I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm supposed to have the path. And until recently, where I have really started to understand the cycle of change and the creation process, where there is a birth and there is a sustaining and then there is the falling away or the transformation. It's only now, and it often happens at this time of year. It often comes up that
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh my God, this life doesn't seem to fit anymore. I don't want to do the things I was doing. I'm not, like, who am I? I find that it's often in the fall. And now, because I've noticed that those feelings often come up, kind of, it's often in the transition as everyone's starting to head back to school and back to routine. And it's also the fall, like the fall equinox. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of in and around that time. There's no specific date, but it's often the few days before school starts that I start having this. I'm gonna say that it's like a slight anxiety, but I recognize it now as the chaos of like, okay, what needs to fall away and what needs to be harvested and what
Mm-hmm.
needs. So being able to sink back into that, knowing that this is part of it, that it has that that I have to let go of anything, that any label that I put on myself. And that's why you and I both call ourselves, I call myself a spark on this spin around the sun, and
Mm-hmm.
felt like fellow spark of light, and you're a sunbeam dancing through life. Because if I put any other label on that, than that, and even that in itself sometimes feels limiting, that's the
Mm-hmm.
best way I can describe myself, is just a fellow spark of light, because then I can be that spark of light in whatever form that comes, whether it's a sparkler that shines and then is quickly gone, or it's a warm glow. But anything else is constricting. And I find that if I have a label, I can't fall back into that chaos and
Mm-hmm.
just sink into it and go, okay, I'm in the unknown. I'm in that fertile void again. And
Yeah.
it's okay, because something is going to be birthed from it. But if I'm hanging on to how I define myself, I can't be in that fertile void, because I keep putting myself back into the sustaining, because I've got to keep this. I've got to keep this going. I've got to keep, and that's where I find my light starts to dim, is when I'm hanging on to, this is what I am, this is what I do. And if I let go of this, I must keep this up at all cost.
Right.
Because if I don't, I'm gonna go into that chaos and that fertile void. And man, is that scary. But I can now, because I know out of it comes something greater. And even with our conversations, I remember when we first started this podcast, and I because of how I've always been and taught to be, okay, got to be prepared, got to have exactly like, no, okay, where are we going? Like, blah, 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 blah. And then as I started to relax into it, because we have different styles, and as I started to relax into the free fall of, like, I don't know where this conversation is going. Yeah, we have an idea, we have a topic, but I don't know where it's going. And man, the magic that happens when it's just like, whoa, like, just give it over to that free flow of like this and that, and listening to each other, and the dance of back and forth. Like, that is what I liken as to falling into that chaos, that void, and then letting it. Yeah, I don't know what we first called that, but that's all the words that came out of my mouth.
I love them. I love them all. No, that's amazing, because, and the reason why I asked that is because there have been many times where the universe has said, okay, just surrender to the void. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to surrender to like 90% of the void, but I've got to hang on to this other, but, and also too, it was a lot of the programming, right? Because what are you going to do? How are you going to keep on making money? How are you going to survive? How are you going to do it? But this is who I've been for so long. What happens if I'm not anymore? One of the things that I did in those times where, when we were in lockdown and all of that stuff, and we couldn't do the things that I was just like, okay, well, how can I redefine myself now? How can I show up in a different way? And I went back into my family business, and then I quickly went back out. But, I tried I went into publishing. I tried on many different outfits until I came back to the outfit that the universe has been like, dude, I don't know why you changed this one. It's the one I gave you. Just stay in it. But I needed to take that step back, and it was once I said, that's it, I am done, that it all just came right back to me. And they, that expression, if you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, that's kind of what it is, but without the, romance thing attached to it. Like, I said to myself, that's it. And I spoke to another woman who's like, not in fitness, but in her industry. And she said a similar thing. She got to a point where she had to let go of what she was doing because she felt as though she was too identified by it. And then she let it go, and then ended up finding herself back in there. And I did that. I mean, it's still in a process thing. But I think it was once I kind of allowed myself to just, like you said, surrender into the void, holding on to one string just in case, but letting that happen. And I think we don't always let that happen. Yeah. We don't always allow ourselves to completely surrender. Like, this is one of the things that I love about astrology is it gives, it's literally a cycle. So from birth to Pisces isn't even the end. It's the beginning of the next thing, right? You know what I mean? It's like the alpha and omega is that beginning and ending point. That's really a transition into the next thing. There is a part, the zodiac does say, and we've talked about this, the zodiac in the summertime, it's a celebration and all of that. Virgo season, which we're in right now, tells us, okay, we've had our fun in Leo season, and now it's time to, harvest. We got to get back to work. We got to put things in order because death is coming. Scorpio season is just, 2 seasons away. We're going to have to look at death, transformation, like the dead of winter is going to come. It's going to be stark, silent, dark. It's going to be all of that stuff. And we got to be able to still be in that. and then come through, like to get out of that, to then come back to life again, which we do in the springtime. So yeah, I really think that it will benefit many people. And I noticed too, once I surrendered, it's like the rebirth came quicker because I wasn't fucking, dragging, holding on for dear life when it was crumbling in my hands.
Which is taking energy.
Yes.
That is needed for the new, it's just energy in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's the hanging on energy instead of like, just, okay, I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to regather. I'm going to rest. I'm going into that winter, which is just a time to recuperate and regenerate. And then the energy is supposed to go this way into spring again, not, can you imagine it? If the seasons hung on, oh my God, I'm not gonna fall. It's not, like the leaves are gonna
the leaves are hanging on
the trees. No, I'm not gonna change color, get some green.
And they call in other trees or other leaves to help them. It's like, no, the leaf is like, all right, I had a good run. See ya.
Exactly.
But it doesn't end there. Right? That leaf will fall onto the ground, and no longer is it, providing shade for someone, but now it's providing nutrients for something in the ground.
Exactly.
Right? And then that something's going to get planted in there, and that nutrient that is in the ground now, thanks to that leaf, will then go into whatever seed is planted there and help that grow and thrive. And so again, it's not about form, it's content. I'm a leaf, I'm food for a worm, I'm a nutrient in the soil to then be something else. Like it's all part of the cycle of life. And
that leaf. Yeah. Oh, keep going.
Well, I was just going to say, it was like once I recognized my part in that cycle and noticed how I'm just going through that cycle, that's really where it becomes endless, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because that leaf became so much more. Because now that leaf is no longer just a leaf. It is part of that earthworm, part of that other plant, which maybe was a tree that bore fruit. And now the leaf is like not only the leaves of that tree and the trunk of that tree, it's the fruit of that tree. And then the cycle continues on into greater expansion things until it contracts again. And then it's honoring these back and forth. Then all of this, now that as we went through this whole conversation and seemed like we were veering away from the conversation about permaculture principles, this whole conversation is permaculture principle number 2, which is catch and store energy. And catch and store energy really means, well, if we use a common phrase, it's make hay while the sun shines, which is basically follow the path of energy where the energy is flowing, where there isn't a lot of resistance. It's the flow of life.
Yeah. And just allowing it to happen, because it's always going to, it's always going to grow into something like, there's some certain parts or certain things that I planted that I didn't really pay much attention to. They still grew. Like maybe they're not as, like maybe some of my tomatoes aren't as big and juicy as my parents because, they put a lot of time and energy into it. I still got a tomato out of it and it's still delicious, right? So it's like, no matter what, it's always going to grow into whatever it's meant to be. But catching and store energy. I mean, and then we can go through the other 11 principles of, obtain a yield and all of that stuff. And that does show up even within the catch and store energy. It just is all part of this like beautiful cycle. And and it's realizing that coming alive isn't an A to B. It's not an A to B. It's allowing for the grace and the space in between and all of the curves and all of the times where it seems like it's not, quote, on the path. I'm this way, I'm that way.
it's all toward honing that essence and not being constricting ourselves into a box of I was labeled this or awarded this or whatever. It's letting our light shine through in whatever way it's going to shine through in that moment. And when it feels like it isn't shining through anymore, then allowing it the space to change and to go into what take whatever form it now needs to take to continue this cycle. Yeah.
Isn't life amazing?
It's amazing. Life is amazing.
It is. It is. There's times where it sucks. Don't get me wrong, but it's still amazing, right? I'm always going to be amazed by how life just is.
Just is. And I love the story, and it's your story, so I'm going to let you share it. But I guess it was a couple of days ago when you talked about the telescope and looking at. I'll let you take it from there, but it's about, oh my God, life is amazing.
Yeah.
Like amazing.
Oh my God. Okay. So I was camping on the weekend, and this man brought a telescope, and he's an engineer. So he sets up this huge thing, and I'm like, oh, can I look through this? He sets it up to look. There was 3 points that we looked at. I didn't tell you that I looked at Vega. Do you know what Vega is?
I've heard of Vega, but
so Vega is like this. It's a cluster of stars in like a far off part of the solar, not even our solar system, like in the galaxy somewhere in the universe. So anyways, first I looked at the moon. Then we looked at Jupiter, because Jupiter's in the sky. And fun fact, the day that I was looking at Jupiter was the day that he stationed retrograde. So I was like, oh, well, that's cool. And then he showed us another cluster where to the naked eye, you couldn't see anything, but you look at it and it's just like this, like, I don't know, there's all these little tiny dots where he said that those are like even more stars, like clusters of stars. It was just so fascinating. But so this engineer's there. I'm looking through the telescope and I'm like, oh my God, I'm looking at Jupiter right now. How amazing is that? I'm looking at the craters of the moon, and I'm literally bursting into glitter. You can hear it in my voice how excited I was. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's what it does. That's just the moon. That's just Jupiter. Like, it's there. And I'm like, yeah, but isn't it amazing? He's like, it was so funny to me, that whole experience. He was just like, like, that's the moon. That's what the moon does. Like, why is this so fascinating to you? I'm like, because the moon.
It's fascinating. And that's coming alive. That's come alive. It's having that wonder and amazement, and that allowing that moment to be filled with awe.
Yeah.
To be awe-inspired, allowing that to happen in the moment, whatever it is we're doing, allowing that wonder and that aliveness to come in to the moment. Yeah.
Well, you and I, we get that. That's a typical Leo thing. We like dramatize everything. We're over enthusiastic about everything. But I mean, over enthusiastic, isn't that just really, really there's no such thing as over enthusiastic to me.
No, and I often got told that as a child, right? Like that I was too dramatic, too over the top, like whatever it was, but that I was too much.
Yeah.
That's what I got told, that I was too much. And it's like,
yeah.
I received that because I didn't know any better, because it was coming from people who were teachers and mentors and elders, and they were telling me that I was too much. So I was like, well, I'm too much. So I'm going to dim it down. And it's like, now that because I think it got to a point where I did get dimmed down so much that I was like, no.
Fuck this.
And that sacred rage, sacred rage came out. It was like, you can't hold me anymore. And then it's out. It's like, and now I'm like, well, I'm not too much, maybe. over enthusiastic.
I don't think I have to say it, but
under enthusiastic. But I mean, like, that's not said with any judgment. It's just
right.
like I'm at this frequency, and here's the other frequency, and it's like, well, which frequency is right or wrong? Well, neither. They're just different, and
Yeah.
so it's appreciating that in every moment, and I want that wonder and that alive feeling and that awe in every moment where it's like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Because it is. Because it is. It just is.
Because it is. And I will look in a telescope and I will look at the moon in the exact same phase, and I will see Jupiter, and like I will, but it will still be the most amazing thing.
Yes.
Because to me, that is like, I don't know, everything. Every class I teach is the best class. Every friend that I have is like my best friend. Like, because I mean, everything's the best. Yeah. Everything's amazing. Well, look how excited I'm getting. My wires are flying all over the place. I don't know. It just, to me, just being alive is so amazing, that everything that's part of being alive is amazing with it. So. Yeah. Yeah. I think we can keep on talking about this forever, but I feel like at some point the listeners are going to have to carry on with their lives. We'll carry on this conversation, but
absolutely. And I think this is a great place to say that our homework or our play for this week is that I was going to say visualize what something, but no, don't visualize it. Just feel what feeling do we want to create? Because if we sink into the feeling that we want to create, then that feeling can take many forms. Yeah. So connect, that's the homework, is connect with the feeling that we want to have, whether it's liberation or freedom or inspiration or whatever it is that we want to feel, sink into that feeling, and then let it come to life in the form that's going to come to life in that moment.
And so it is. I love that. Yeah. And for those of you that are listening to this the day that it releases, tomorrow is a new moon. So this is being released in the new moon energy. So if you're listening to this, we release on Wednesdays. If you're listening, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you're in that energy of the full moon. So setting that intention, feeling that. That's the best way that you can set intention. It's not about writing it down in a journal. I mean, that's part of it, but it's all about the feeling. You then become that vibration, and it draws more of that in. So feel the feels, my loves. This is it.
Oh my God.
I love you so much.
I love you.
On that note, check out the show's notes for all the details of the stuff that's in the show's notes that you need. And check out the Living Spiritfully. Go to livingspiritfully.com to join the collective. And Catherine, take us home, girl.
Remember, we are meant to thrive. How do you come alive?
The Living Spiritfully podcast is a Spiritful production. Executive producer, Paul Galloro. Co-producers, Claudia, Micco, and Catherine Stilo. A big thank you and much love to you, the Living Spiritfully community, for liking, subscribing, sharing, and supporting this podcast.